and welcome from myself, Jamie of GEOSynths, and we're back with another GEOSynths Synth Show, episode 109.
Hello, guys. I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining on the show. And of course, as I mentioned, it must have been about 18 months ago when you first kind of laid that out, or when I kind of got the link, and it was like, wow, this sounds so good. You know, here we are buying all these synths that are from these manufacturers, and then you've made your own. It just had this brilliant tone. But what I will do is play a little bit of yours, and then after I'll give a bit of an introduction. So let's go, first of all, the very first one that you've made, your first prototype, because there's actually two, but we'll get into that in a moment. So here's a little bit of the Advantage 03M. Oh, come on, YouTube. Oh, that's a very nice, clear Duran, say a prayer, a bit square wave there. But yeah, just a bit of an introduction. He's originally from Southeast London, got into music through DJing in the mid to late 90s, working in pirate radio and club events. He later moved into music production and got into hardware synths. And in 2016, he wanted to make his own synthesizer, but had very little knowledge of electronics. I mean, essentially starting from scratch, and he jumped feet first in and started breadboarding some well-known oscillators and created his own design, really. This has now led to his very own prototype monosynth, the Advantage 03M, which is a 3 VCO monster, which we just had a bit of a listen to, and more recently a smaller 02M. So I'll just take a look, actually, these pictures, these images. So here's some boards of the is this the 03M, these boards that you're seeing on the screen?
So basically what it is, the 03M and the 02M share quite a lot of same boards, apart from the filters. This thing I'll go into a bit more detail. So basically you have the basis like your oscillators. So basically how I kind of came to an idea of what it was. There was a guy who helped me actually translate the schematics to PCBs, and he said to me, rather than do one big PCB, perhaps you could do it in small modules. And I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. So doing it through a kind of a smaller modular scale allowed me to transport different parts to different synths. So say, for instance, I wanted to make an 05 or an 04, but there's slightly different features within the models, as the 03 has two Steiner Parker type filters in series, and the 02 has two SEM clone filters in series. So they do have two different sounds to them. So there is a few other differences, like the 02 has two sub-oscillators where it loses one oscillator, but each VCO has a sub-oscillator on it as well. And there's a few other, whereas the 03 has patch points, etc. So yeah.
All right, great stuff. Well, I've got a few videos lined up, so we'll have a listen to them. But really, what I want to know is, like, how did it all kind of come about? Because we were talking a little bit beforehand that it really was, you knew nothing about it, and rather than thinking, I've got an interest in learning about electronics, you knew, I want to make a synth. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it was funny. I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine. He's a studio engineer called Owen Palmer, aka Hatrix. And I kind of said to him one day, I said, wouldn't it be cool if you could build your own synth? And because he showed me sort of some of his semi-modular stuff, which was like things like the Dark Energy that he had kind of just recently acquired. I was really inspired, and I thought, wow, that's quite awesome, seeing all the patchability, etc. on it. And I thought this was when there was a lot of desktop semi-modulars starting to come about. This was that kind of from that period, sort of, I don't know, maybe about 2015. And he said, well, maybe wouldn't it be better if you kind of went down the Eurorack sort of route, And I thought, maybe. I didn't really understand, so I thought, let me just give something a go. So I kind of, because I kind of watched quite a lot of demo videos on YouTube, and I saw this guy. I think he went by the name of Tear Grinder, spelled Teir, and he built his own Jupiter 4, sorry, Jupiter 8 clone, but it was like a cut down 4 voice version. I think he did it on like a voice card kind of basis. So, and I thought, wow, this is like a sought after synth which goes into the thousands. This guy's made one himself. Incredible. So yeah.
But I mean, we you know, saying before, we all have this kind of idea. Oh, it'd be great to create our own synth and all that type of thing. But you know, that's a massive learning curve to get to that point to then start to make your own synth, and then the whole pitfalls of getting it right, getting it wrong, scrapping it, and all that type of thing. So to be able to like just think I want to do it. So, but can you remember really what it was like after you'd sort of decided, you'd seen what your friend had got, you thought, right, I'm going to start. What was the first thing you did?
I think the first thing I did was look into prototyping boards. I mean, I didn't really have a clue about any of it, to be honest with you, but there used to be like a kind of local-ish Maplin shop, which are now
I remember
gone out of business, etc. Yeah, so I sort of used to do a few trips there and sort of pick up a few bits and pieces, and I had a look at a few things online. Like I sort of thought, oh, how do you build oscillators? And the first one I had a go at was the Jupiter 8 oscillator, but what I didn't realize was
you did an easy one.
Yeah. Straight into the fire.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. So what was it? You said you didn't realise.
I didn't realise basically a VCO is comprised of an oscillator plus a exponential converter, which makes it the voltage controlled oscillator. So you could build an oscillator, sort of a free sort of running oscillator, but I didn't realize you needed the voltage control to have the musical, to give the musical scaling, pitching, whatever you want to call it. So I had a go at sort of doing that, and I kind of built it successfully. I meticulously went over everything. It didn't work. And I didn't actually realize you need control voltage input to this thing. Oh, okay. So I kind of scrapped it and thought, okay, let's try something else. And there was another video I watched. There was this guy who was called, I think, something Bennett. He made something called the LDR synth, and it was a very simple synthesizer, and it was basically built where the filter was actually controlled by a light-dependent resistor, and he put the schematic online. So I had to go at this, and it basically gave out a pulse wave, which you could modulate, you could vary the width using the manual control. So I tried that, and that actually came out successful. And I was like, wow. But then I tapped into another audio point and found a triangle wave, and I was like, oh, okay.
Ah, right. I see. So there's an element of taking what somebody else has done, building upon it, but then, in a sense, you're deconstructing it as you're building it. To then find, actually, I could do this and do that and be creative with that. Right. That's a really good. Though, I mean, schematics. The old synths, when you find the old manuals, but then there's the service manual, and it's just like, like you were saying before, hieroglyphics. What it is. But it must have took a long time to. I mean, were you kind of sort of building and learning at the same time, learning about electronics, or was it, how did you do it really?
I mean, to be honest with you, even the learning side, I mean, it was pretty much trial and error. I mean, what I was figuring out, I wasn't actually electronically having the knowledge of saying, okay, well, the reasons why this happens, or you get this kind of curve, or you get this discharge curve, was because of this. You needed this capacitor. I really didn't understand so I was basically piecing things together, seeing what happened, and then slowly those things I was starting to look at more schematics, and things were starting to make more sense. I mean, I started downloading schematics of lots of different synthesizers, like the Moogs, the old Roland Junos.
Oh, sorry, I've cut you off there. My apologies. Wrong button.
That's okay. And I started to notice common traits within these circuit diagrams. and how the sort of the building blocks are joined together. So, okay, this is all the oscillator outputs. They now go into the filter. So this is the pathway for the filter. Right, okay, now this joins onto the amplifier side. And then it was trying to learn, right, okay, well, you've got all this, you've got the sound source now. How do you actually control that? How do you actually articulate? How do you apply the articulation to it, you know? And
well,
again,
it must have been an easier way to, like your friend was saying, just do it in modules and do it modular and then using patching, but you've kind of normaled it all behind so it actually can do something without patch points. So was that a decision then, you know, no, I'm definitely going to do it that way, one single unit. And was the kind of view to, you know, I mean, were you building it for yourself or was it in mind to be a product?
no, basically, I just kind of built it as I wanted a unique. When I first got into hardware synths, I was a bit of a. You might not like this. I was a bit of a anti-preset man. So
It's
basically,
all right. You say what you like. Say what you like. Don't worry.
so basically, if I wanted to have to incorporate sounds within my productions, I would always sort of go out of my way to sort of create my own unique sounds, layer sounds, use different synthesizers and combine the different synthesizers. So maybe on one part of the chord, I would have like maybe say the root note would be from an analog, and then would have a bit of some digital and some romplers creating the rest of that chord or that patch to make my own, you know, and then creating different panning effects. So I just loved creating my own sounds, and I was very much into sort of. I was very much a sound spotter. You know, when you hear a sound and you go, "Oh, where does that sound come from?"
Yeah.
It was that instrument. It was that instrument. So
Yes.
there's very much an element of that, of having that passion for doing sound recreation as well.